I bet you never thought you'd see these two games side by side. Let's put Minecraft Story Mode and EFPC to rest. Hell, publishing itself has already done so for Story Mode. As Telltale shuts down and the rights of ownership and distribution get a little bit funky, people who own the games had to be given one last chance to download what they paid for. The only issue there is that, at least on one platform, they need to be on sale to be downloadable. So, Story Mode for the Xbox 360, for a short while after my video, became one of the most valuable games on the planet, with each individual episode going for $99.99. I did say in my video that people undervalued Minecraft Story Mode, and, well, I meant that critically, but apparently monetarily as well. To expand on that, I can't claim to be much better in terms of dismissiveness and undervaluing certain things anyway. We all only have so much time. It takes a strange person to decide that actually, you know, Story Mode deserves as much of a shake as I gave it. I'm drawn to odd and obscure things, at least partly because of the sense of novelty. Of the fact there are very few people who have seen something or seen something in something. And I feel quite fortunate that I've so often stumbled into things I find interesting. In Story Mode, it feels like a lot of people kind of blundered it into it anyway, but I was the only one who saw a certain something, whereas usually it's stuff like Precursors and Escape from Paradise City, which come out later, where it was me and a select few people who happened to cross paths with it. Minecraft Story Mode, by its strange open-ended concept, had me interested from the start. The utter tonal oddity of Season 1 and far better handled, but, well, sort of already doomed Season 2, meant to me that my interest had paid off. There are a couple of ill-worded comments in my video, mind. One was that I said Minecraft was on the way out when Story Mode Season 1 was coming out. What I had meant to say is that its big heyday was done. It was still massively successful, still the biggest game in the bloody world at the time, I believe. But it was beginning to wane, however little that meant from the position that it was in. I chose the worst possible wording, and to some it sounded like I was saying that it was spiraling towards obscurity, which, yeah, I definitely should have chosen my words better, because that's not at all what I meant. I also did get a lot of comments requesting coverage on other games from Telltale's lineup. Tales from the Borderlands and Sam & Max, mostly. Sam & Max, overall, I just got to admit I have not touched, the older games included, and I'm very likely missing out there. But those who know me know that I have a big distaste of Borderlands. It's basically a self-indulgent hatred at this point, which is why I won't even make a video on Borderlands proper to explain my hatred. My videos may already be steeped in personal opinion, but I just have to admit, I will be unfair on Borderlands. I simply hate Borderlands 2 that much. I despise it. Every single facet of it. There is not a single thing in Borderlands that I like. Even if it's just by association. Even as an element that's totally fine, the facts in Borderlands just makes me hate it. I just have that. And I don't think that's going to change, and I don't think it's worth the effort of changing for myself. It's like, I beat Borderlands 1, I got most of the way through Borderlands 2, and if I was finding myself irked by every little thing, then fuck it. I'm out. I'm done. I gave it that shake. Besides that, I'm unsure on how much more there is to say as far as Telltale actually goes. The Walking Dead was the only series I had that I was really following, and I beat Season 4. It's leagues above Season 2 and 3 in terms of actual, genuine quality. I wound up liking it quite a lot. I think the last episode was a bit too fast-paced. Some scenes didn't land as well as I'd have liked because of it, but it sort of worked in other areas. Some of the character deaths were helped by how quickly they had to move on. It was less like Season 2's forgetfulness, where 5 minutes after a character has died, everyone's moved on. It was more that the final episode never gave anyone a chance to really rest on their laurels. The pace was quite breakneck. It's like, if someone died, you don't have time to sit around crying about that. We have to move on to the next thing right now. It worked a lot better in that regard. Minecraft Story Mode became a pet interest of mine, as this video had shown. Its odd pedigree meant that its real weirdness flew under the kind of surface level weirdness. And then we have Wolf Among Us, the Fables adaptation that I wasn't really that into. I beat the first episode and then watched the rest in a playthrough while doing something else, really. I liked it. I liked the tone. I think it was probably their second... It wasn't as good as Walking Dead for me, but it was at least genuinely good. And I was like, okay, I can understand why people like this. It just wasn't really for me. So, yeah, I guess I'm hardly one to talk about laziness. Especially because, by all accounts, as another one that people quite liked. Maybe I'm just drawn to the underdog, even though Minecraft was hardly the underdog. I don't know. Tastes are arbitrary and weird. I think that's just the truth that I have known for a while, and I think a lot of people kind of know it but don't like to acknowledge that, because arbitrary is often kind of unsatisfying, but that's what we are. We're fucking arbitrary creatures. I guess there's nowhere else better to say about Detroit, that I just got really bored of Detroit. As in, I still don't even know how Detroit... I'm talking about David Cage, not Telltale, by the way. I don't even know how Detroit ends. I have no idea why. I just got bored, felt I had no will to keep playing it. So yeah, laziness once again. It's funny, how did I get bored of Cage when he was being... that game was so loaded and so on the nose that I should have been entertained at every stop, and I kind of was, but at some point it's like, man, I don't care. And that game has choices that apparently change shit. Like, I don't know what the ending is, but apparently there's more than one. So multiple endings and a hilariously bit of inept allegory. That's all things. That should have had me watching with bated breath, but I don't know. I don't have too many words on Telltale's Ultimate Fate, besides what have kind of been asked in questions. There have been videos made on the topic and articles on the topic that delve into the business end and, talks to those who had boots on the ground. So, I have to start by saying, because this is related to one of the questions, I am not a business expert, far from a business expert. I'm a fucker with a Bachelor of Arts degree and a fascination with the inept. So... Also, I briefly touched on Minecraft itself in the video. I do actually like Minecraft. I think it's a fine game. It's not one I play that often. I was playing it pretty regularly years ago. I can't touch it single player anymore. It needs to be with some friends. And I have had friends asking me to do a playing on Minecraft itself, but I've not really been taken with doing that. So, yeah, it's not really something I'm interested in. Rather than creating more Walking Dead, as the CEO of Telltale put it to the people with their boots on the ground, what if Telltale instead diversified their productions and built upon the foundation of Walking Dead, as opposed to riding its coattails for as long as possible? Would they still be around today to tell the tale, or would the upper management still find a way to cock that up? Yeah, you can find a way. Reason why I had to preface this by saying I'm not a business expert. I had long laboured under a big misinterpretation of Telltale, that their engine, the Telltale tool, was an engine specialised for the production of more Walking Dead. And so getting more and more bankable IPs and creating more products was, while obviously not a doddle, I don't believe any game development could be described as a doddle, a relatively streamlined affair. And that's why the company could crank products out at a similar technical quality, if not an artistic one, pretty consistently. I mean, their technical quality was already a mess. There was big slowdown and frame rate issues on consoles, and Season 2 of Walking Dead and Minecraft Story Mode had a lot of animations that just would not play correctly or subtitles that were wrong. Their technical quality quickly became a fucking mess. From an outside perspective, it looks like The Walking Dead being a runaway success was taken as a call to grab more big IPs and try and catch that lightning in a bottle again. A kind of misinterpretation that it wasn't the quality of the product, but that it came from something already big. So there are two problems. One is that the Telltale tool is apparently actually an awful engine to work with. In fact, had Telltale survived the final season, they were intending to move to Unity to ease development and modernize. The other problem is within that misunderstanding of what they had with Walking Dead. With their production pipeline, I'm not sure if there is much time for optimization or actually building on gameplay elements. I remember a preview for The Walking Dead 400 Days, the expansion pack extra episode for Walking Dead Season 1. Back then, they promised to expand on the QTEs to kind of give the gameplay a tiny bit more depth. No one cared. And in later seasons, QTEs just became more simplistic. And many failures didn't have death states, likely to make things simpler and to streamline scenes. And features such as a proper chapter select or dialogue skipping for replays never really came about. There was some chapter select, but no, it didn't at a level I wanted. I say that as someone who did playthroughs of the games and wanted to skip around to capture extras more easily. Whether for artistic or mechanical reasons, I could not say why those features were never implemented. Perhaps the Telltale tool just couldn't do that kind of thing, so never really got around to adding that. I'm not sure how much there is that could be done. Expanding on the scope of these games mechanically would have likely killed the momentum of making multiple games. Expanding on the depth of mechanics also might kill part of their demographic. People who don't play games, who don't have the, I don't want to say manual dexterity or skill with games, so you don't really want to challenge those people too much. I mean, ultimately, I think they'd be dead either way. Like, no matter what I'm saying in the rest of this question, it's just a case of the management they had wouldn't have gone down another route. You know, if in an alternate reality where Telltale survived, they would have had different management as well, I'd be willing to say. You know, where the management in charge made a different decision and thus were different management. Here's a dangerous hypothetical I'd like you to explore. In a future where Telltale didn't go broke, Sega gives them the Yakuza franchise in a desperate attempt to bring the franchise to the West. What is Telltale's Sega's Yakuza story mode like? How does it compare to other Telltale things you have played in this more fortunate reality? Kind of funny you say Yakuza story mode when Yakuza is already a pretty big story mode, but regardless of that. So, in fixed franchises, in other franchises, other IPs that Telltale's allowed to handle, which is really all they did in their last few years, Telltale do kind of lower deck stories. They focus on smaller characters, such as the Nothing family in Game of Thrones, or they do interquels, prequels, and the like. Things that don't really affect the actual big players or change the course of the story. The Walking Dead would never let us kill Rick, for instance. This isn't a Hunt Down the Freeman sort of deal. Hunt Down the Freeman told a self-defeating story. Telltale invented new stories, not trying to influence the old ones. And really, The Walking Dead was more just an excuse to tell a zombie story, and the IP just was kinda some intellectual property power, really. So I'm going to modify a Yakuza-inspired tabletop campaign that I never ran, or have yet to, anyway. Make the cast smaller than a typical Yakuza game, but with two protagonists, with each episode dedicated 50% to each of the two characters, the player playing as both, and choices in one maybe affecting the other a little bit in kind of loose, vague ways. It takes place in a small coastal town in Japan, far less important than Tokyo or Osaka. This being a dock town, it makes it valuable to the Yakuza. Its location makes it tricky to hold for either the Tojo or the Omi. Why is it valuable to the Yakuza? Well, as a dock town, it means that you can bring things in and ship goods out. So, and you know, it's a bit smaller, it's a bit of a poorer area, so you know, there's plenty of reason why either group would want to hold this for as an area of kind of strategic importance. It starts with a young but promising Yakuza being given the offer to start his own family, kind of like when Kiryu was in his late 20s at the beginning of Yakuza 1 and was on the cusp of starting his own family. However, this guy has a condition. He has to start his new family but move to this small coast town. He has to move out of Kamurocho, go there instead. And he takes the deal, but soon after arriving in this town, he realizes that he's been placed in a town crawling with Omi, biker gangs, and corrupt cops. And he realizes that this offer was stacked against him. He wasn't being thrown to the lions, but he realized, oh, this is what my career is now. I'm in a town that's full of people who would have my fucking head on a platter at a moment's instance. There are other Tojo families in the area, but they're also quite small. So he has some friends here, but not too many, and they've been there a bit longer than he has, and they still see this newly arrived family head, just a bit of an upstart, really. And worse yet, in one of those other small Tojo families that are in the area, the patriarch was just murdered, and his wife has now taken over as kind of interim or matriarch of that family while they try and figure out some things. Like the captain hasn't just moved up right away, like she took charge, and that's created a bit of friction there. So the player plays as a new recruit brought into that Tojo family, and you know, his boss is scrambling around trying to get things set up. You have to run a few odd jobs for him. And you also play as the private detective investigating the murder of the patriarch on request of his wife. For the record, I started planning this campaign just before Judgment was announced. So the whole private detective angle was, no, you know, while not original, we've played law enforcement and law enforcement adjacent types in Yakuza before. You know, that kind of thing. Judgment wasn't quite announced. I wasn't entirely influenced by that. So the episodes would half follow the troubles of this new Yakuza family as they make contacts, try and keep the Omi at bay, fight with bikers, and the young boss has to deal with the cops and start extorting businesses, establishing his territory and fighting with others. Meanwhile, the detectives investigate the murder of this, for the town, relatively high-ranking Yakuza, try and deal with the local escalation, like, because they're trying to figure out, was it an Omi who did it? Was it someone in his own family? What does this mean? And, you know, there's more business dealings going about in town. Try and have a bit of a, you know, I actually, for the record, I had just figured out the beginning. I hadn't actually figured out who had murdered him yet, or one of my players actually listens to these Afterthought videos, so now they know, is like, I didn't have an ending in mind yet. I was just gonna start playing and hopefully work it out as I went and try and make it satisfying. So the fight scenes in it would obviously be over the top, the drama would be mellow, and to emulate the series' minigames, each episode would have a minigame on both sides. So you do sort of lose out in a Yakuza game by not being able to do free travel, but, you know, in this reality, you know, maybe this would be a Telltale game that had a hub or some such. That's a bit of influence from that game by, Hazelight Studios? Are they Hazelight? I can't remember. A Way Out. In each chapter in A Way Out, there was a little mini game of sorts. I actually really liked A Way Out. I had a lot of fun playing that co-op. There's like something delightfully high energy and very earnest about A Way Out that I was loving that start to finish. And the series has common themes of honor and loyalty, and I feel that the setup I have in mind allows for plenty of rumination on those themes. The young boss realizes he was given a family, but he's in this very dangerous situation. He's been given a bit of a raw deal, so does he stay loyal to the Tojo in that instance? You think, this is something I have to do to prove myself to the Tojo, to do right by the family men above me. Is like, am I put out by this, or is this my grand chance to take this town and really prove my worth? And then, you know, there's honor and loyalty in the investigation of the boss's murder, and then maybe the wife could be a bit of a suspect in that at that point. You know, I feel there's plenty of angles to follow loyalty and honor as themes throughout this story. I was going to run that in Savage Worlds and kind of have a custom system for heat moves, and it was going to have a bit more of a magical element. It was, the campaign name was Irizumi Kai, which, yeah, fucking weeb shit. Just translates literally as tattoo clans, because this was going to be an alternate reality 1970s, 80s Japan, where tattoos had very limited but actual powers, where some people would have powers of magnetism or being able to actually hammer space weapons by pulling out a weapon, and the weapon would be in your body as a tattoo before you pulled it out, those kind of powers. And in this story, I've tried to stick to the rule that it tells a new story that doesn't intersect or even require acknowledgement in the source material. You know, like, at best, Majima would turn up at some point for a cameo or something like that. But besides this is an entirely isolated incident following the tone and broader themes of its source material, while never actually, you know, Kiryu's never going to turn up, essentially. Kiryu will never even need to hear about this. These are all branch families and really low-ranking families in the Tojo who never really intersect with the big dogs. I've combined a couple of questions here. In the Dark Timeline, wherein Telltale made a third season of this being Minecraft Story Mode, what would you have liked to see them try and do to liven up the formula? If you were put in charge of making a Minecraft Story Mode-esque story, where would you take it and what would you do with the narrative? So I combine these two since I feel they sort of go hand in hand. And I'm failing to see a dark future where Season 3 happened, but that's just me. So to start off with, Season 2 added segments where you could build structures into the game. All this really did was add a tiny bit more self-expression into matters, and I think that's really as far as you can maybe go with it. There might be a gameplay puzzle element, but I'll get into that because I've written that down later in the question, and I'm getting ahead of myself. Whoops. This is a reality where I'm calling shots and have to expand, but I'll try and keep it within what I said in previous answers. But since this is me in charge, I would darken the narrative a little bit. Nah, a ton. I'd push it into the stranger elements of Season 1, but take the fact that Season 2 all but outright says that this is basically a multiplayer server, and then I'd take those two facts of it, darker but multiplayer server, and I would mix those together, mix them up a little bit. Jesse would no longer be the protagonist, because Jesse is, by the end of Season 2, at the top of the power scale. They're no longer interesting as a character. They've beaten up the admin. So back to basics with a new cast of characters. And my theme, and this is insane, so be ready for this, it's order versus chaos. In the wake of the admin being defeated, at first it's, okay, we can go back to normal, but there's a bit of growing superstition about that, because, you know, the admin was defeated, the god of this world was defeated, so people kind of realize, well, that must mean that there is a greater base of power that we can aspire to. So people start going out and really looking into adventuring for relics. It kind of kicks off a great new wave of adventurers who go out looking for things. And in that, a lot of relics get pulled out. And yeah, I'm breaking one of the rules I said in that video. It's like, I was kind of interested because like Machinima, you got to follow the rules. Now, with Season 1 broke the rules, Season 2 kind of broke the rules. Now I'm just like, fuck it, I'll break the rules too. Makes it easier to answer this. I'm cheating. I'll start by explaining the chaos side of the theme, since it's easier. This is inspired by 2B2T. If you haven't heard of 2B2T, look that up. That is the premier, the old-ass fucking anarchy server of Minecraft servers. There were no rules. People are allowed to cheat and hack in those servers. It has a strange and rich history. It's an anarchy server in the truest sense. But there are self-imposed rules, there are guilds and bands of players who police the place and try and keep some semblance of order. They try and keep some roads going, they try and make sure that, you know, the entrance can kind of be navigated in and out of. Kill griefers, there are wars fought, there are bases established. And the place is just riddled with abandoned bases and death traps and famine for miles. So that's the chaos thing. So as you can already see where I'm going, there is a part of the world in my Minecraft Story Mode Season 3 that is becoming like 2B2T, which is just, it's being strip-mined, essentially, as people realize there's really no rules, there's really no overhead, we just have to find relics. So some people just went nuts with it, and shit's blowing up, and weird structures are being made, weird bases are being made, weird outposts that pocket this anarchy land are being made as people just kind of fight for it. The order part comes from an old story that I went looking for when I read this question and started writing up my answer, that I sadly can no longer find. There was a faction war server in Minecraft, and it had very severe death penalties. Reviving people was slow and arduous. If you died, you were just kind of sent to this boring afterlife where you couldn't do much for a while, for a very long time. So actual wars were really felt in this server, because if you died in wartime, that was actually a blow to you. So the article mostly was talking with server regulars who weren't involved with the conflict itself. They were just kind of building and living their time and role-playing it up in this server. They weren't interested in the conflict, but they were affected by it. And what was the big takeaway of this war? Sorry about that. And what was the big takeaway of this war? Well, it's mostly that they're boring. It was a very, very boring matter. It was, you know, you stayed locked up in your homes and you just kind of hoped the war didn't look in your direction. And I found that very, very interesting. And I'm sad I can no longer find this article. So the story itself would follow a group of settlers who maybe come from a group of different, like maybe one of them was one of these people who was raiding 2B2T lands. Maybe one of them was from Jesse's Beacon Town and could tell you what's been going on there. It would take place a few years after, you know, the whole admin incident of Season 2. You would play the builder of this town. People would be kind of in defined roles in this town. It'd be people who do the farming, people who do the hunting, people who are the warriors, the town guards, some people who are just kind of turning up and finding their place in this new society. But your job is mostly to build. But besides that, you kind of have a lot of free reign in what you do in this town. It's like, yeah, you're the builder, but you also can kind of go out and help the hunters or inspect things or talk. And you kind of also handle a bit of the diplomacy. You know, the rules aren't that strict about what you're doing. It's just, oh, this is the guy who's in charge of building. He's, you know, go to him if you have to really talk about it. But kind of everyone's just kind of doing what they want because it's the Minecraft server and you can't really keep too much of an eye on everybody. Each episode would actually take place a decent amount of time apart from the previous episode, months up to a year. And because you're the builder, you know, you basically do still have the building segments. You kind of decide a bit of what the town looks like. You settle on the theme for this town. You settle on maybe the shape for this town. So you have a bigger feeling of self-expression in this town of you've decided what it looks like. You've decided what the background for a lot of this story is. And the first episode, besides that, would be establishing the village, making some choices about how to arrange things. Is this town militaristic? Are they agricultural? How do you mostly bring in food? How do you mostly treat people who come to settle? Like, are you going to be a small, tight-knit, militaristic group? Or are you going to welcome all comers, all settlers, and be expansionist and, you know, have farms, that kind of thing? And, you know, that would set the tone of how people around you act in this ideal reality where it could account for choices that big. And to expand on the building thing, there would be building puzzles, tower defense games where you cut mobs off, or you build defenses for your own people in the case of attack. And the episode would end with picking a ruler or putting yourself up to rule. And the following episodes would deal with the spreading, like, 2B2T zone as it kind of encroaches, like, comes nearer and nearer to town. It's like, do we try and cut these people off entirely, or do we, you know, exist as kind of a oasis in this? Or do we declare, like, no, we're not about this and try and actually go fighting with them? That kind of thing. Do you go and talk with the other old city-states? Do you make alliances with things like Beacon Town or whatever the other old cities where you introduce a bunch of cities and you expand the scope greatly? Like, you're getting into, like, season 1 dealt with this adventure but you didn't really know much. Season 2 had a few city-states and you learned a bit about Jesse's town. Season 3 is we're gonna fucking teach kids about politics, geopolitics. Like, but, you know, how do you deal with real big shit? And then you have a few Minecraft combat and building set pieces. Bit of fan service. You see Jesse. I mean, like, you know, for the fans of the series, not Minecraft tits are being brought out. That would be weird. Let's not go there. And, you know, with that, I hope we can kind of capture that Minecraft sense of player-supplied creativity. Yeah, that's where I'd go with it. You know, establish a town, deal with this changing state of the world, that kind of thing. And in this time of climate change and real fears like that, then we can make a big point with the 2B2T zone that this is really bad. I shouldn't laugh about that. Oh. What franchises do you think would actually benefit from gaining a story mode? Telltale's Breaking Bad, Telltale's Fargo, Telltale's Twin Peaks, Telltale's American Horror Story, Telltale's Prison Break. Not even I can say that with a fucking totally straight face. My throat is a little bit sore today, I apologise. It's very dry. What's funny is, my answer at one point was going to include Telltale's Yakuza, but I thought that was too self-indulgent. But then later on, I got that question about Telltale's Yakuza story mode, and since I group these by user, and then I make that user first come, first served, I actually got to indulge that. And I wrote the answer to this question before I even got that one. Now, I mean, I don't think any show would ever really be hurt or helped by having a story mode. I do actually wonder what the overlap is on people who was watching or reading Telltale's The Walking Dead and then, like, came onto that rather than coming into Telltale's The Walking Dead individually because it was a spin-off. I don't know how much Fable's The Wolf Among Us benefited, because I'm not really into comics, so I don't actually know generally how big comic readership is. It's big enough to be sustaining, obviously. So I'm not sure how much Telltale, if anything, significantly boosted awareness of it. The Walking Dead, its greatest claim to fame was already a big mainstream success, and Minecraft Story Mode couldn't really damage Minecraft. It let a few people crack an easy joke, but that's not gonna hurt Minecraft in the slightest. It's too big for that. Weird off-note question about this. How well do you think Minecraft, as its own thing, sets goals for players, and would somehow having a direct story mode implemented, a la this, or on the other end of the spectrum, Dragon Quest Heroes, help or hinder it in the long run? I'm unsure due to how and when I played Minecraft. I was playing it when most people, myself included, had to reference wikis for recipes, and it was very clearly something where you had a big world and set your own goal. Actually, when I started, I was playing during in-dev, so not a big world at all. I was mostly on like floating vertical worlds. That was my jam. The achievement system, that's more or less a guide. The achievement system is more or less a guide for new players with suggesting what to build and such. And I suppose it works. I never much see anyone talk about how Minecraft is hard to approach. The story mode would probably work like an extended, maybe disguised tutorial, making the player build certain objects and place certain blocks, just teaching how something is done and a little application without saying, and this is how you should do it, before letting players head off into the actual game and getting on with their own goals. Like, maybe a tutorial could kind of say, look, there's no real end state to all this. There is really. There's the Ender Dragon, I'm sorry, yeah. But, it's like, just go out there and do what you want. Have fun. World's your oyster. And to some people, that's too much freedom, and to others, that's like, fantastic. Let's get on with it, As I get older, I'm definitely more in the camp of please give me a goal and tell me what to do. My imagination is dying, which is terribly unfortunate, but I've got my own, hobby in writing to let my imagination keep. A more fully fledged story mode, I'd probably be most receptive to as something that's part of the procedural generation. Like, have a still big procedurally generated world, but certain story locations are baked into the generation within a certain radius of each other. And, the goals are to raid tombs, find and gather things, maybe get clues, like you get maps and you get books with guides in them. The books could have procedural generation in, head north and then northeast this many kilometers. Yeah, it could still be a good way to teach kids about, how to use a map, how to read a map and such. That could be fun. But who wants to teach things? Adding too much story into Minecraft itself, I don't know, it still seems at odds, because this is inside the game rather than an outside addendum like story mode is. I am admittedly a bit out of the loop on what Minecraft is like nowadays. I never really fiddled with stuff like redstone. I've never beat the Ender Dragon. The last time I was playing semi-regularly and was building a world was just before the Nether was introduced. That's how long ago we're talking. I still don't dislike Minecraft. Sometimes mates do set up servers and I'll hop in for a little bit, but I don't really stick around long enough to really get to grips with what's new. Yeah, I'm kind of I'm a bit Minecraft old-fashioned. And of course I like Minecraft. It allowed hardcore Minecraft to happen. And I love when a game of hardcore Minecraft rolls around. It's a pain for Noonan to organise. I'm not on the organisational front. That's his burden to carry, unfortunately. And hardcore is something I doubt was even intended officially for Minecraft, but it works. Minecraft allows for it. How well an open-ended game defines goals is a massively individual matter. Achievements may seem hand-holdy to some and totally missed by others. A set story mode has the danger of giving players an idea of how they're meant to play when Minecraft allows for many approaches and can fulfill different needs for different people. To some, it's a creative outlet. To some, it's a survival game, a mix of the two, or a mutated battle royale deathmatch. And that's where we leave Minecraft story mode, so let's move on to Escape from Paradise City. Part of the reason vampires threw me was that one of the earliest things I heard about the game was that nearing the end, aliens get involved. I have no source for where I heard that, and I was just as baffled and intrigued by that as anything else. But yeah, vampires. It's odd when a series only gets 1 1/3 games in before a strange shark jump like that, regardless of how much sense it winds up accidentally making, even in retrospect. Ultimately, though, this did wind up being one of the most self-defeating games I've ever played. Almost a dartboard of experimental features that don't really feel balanced against one another. One thing I didn't actually talk about much were the cutscenes. I left them in so I could probably be the first source for them on YouTube, but since I found them so late in actually making the video, they do sit mostly uncommented on. For the most part, it is summed up pretty quickly in what I initially said about them. The cutscenes are cheesy, but I think they're very fun. They're very high energy, they're very earnest. All the voice actors seem to be on that wavelength with delightfully overdone performances, particularly Boris. Boris wound up my favourite character by far. I think Boris is fascinating. In a better written game, there is something about this character who becomes the villain and just gets away with it without questioning that would be a very fascinating thing to see play out. He's just this bizarre antagonist, but not. I am genuinely amazed by how, even with that ending cutscene, there were no lessons learned. Gangland, even, if you think about the ending of Gangland, it ended on a rather tragic note. The revenge was complete, but Mario is still the Don, and the constant gang warfare is still ongoing. The final bit of story in the game is him running off to join yet another gunfight. There is some resolution in Escape from Paradise City in that Boris is undoubtedly at the top. You know, he's now the top dog in the city. He has the hotel, the presidential, as he now calls it. Mario, at the end, was strong, but was still just another family. But Boris is president. Porter would be more or less no different, sans the fact he's an orphan now. He already had millions to his name. Angel either forgave Boris killing her shot at freedom, or decided not to mess with him and fled to spend the rest of her life in hiding. I guess my saying the moral is that crime pays isn't true. It's more that crime pays if you go all the way. No half measures. Porter wasn't taking over from Santiago. He was enacting vengeance. He fell into the same trap that Mario did. That's not a full measure. Angel had no motivation to go after Santiago by the time it rolled around, but did it for the sake of honor. Didn't know that Kovacs was dead and the NSA no longer was overlooking things. Also, yes, Angel's full name is Angel Vargas. It only comes up in the manual and really nowhere else. Perhaps at some point there was a more pronounced familial relation between Santiago Vargas and Angel Vargas. Or maybe it's just a coincidence. Who can say? Besides the people in the credits. I don't know, Mario's tragic. You never even hear his name at the end. He's just, I think Mario was just lost to time. He just ran off to, in the ending, we see him running off to another gunfight. How many more gunfights did he survive? At what point did his story ultimately end? Because I kind of doubt it was, a glorious one. It was just another gunfight in the city, and Mario wasn't a vampire. Also, this is something I realized very late into editing, and it's about the state of the city. So, Gangland had 4 maps, 4 areas in Paradise City. Little Italy, the docks, the strip, and 1 more map. And I didn't know what this area was called. But in the extra materials for Gangland, there is a map type, and it's called Poor. It's the one with the big bridge. In Escape from Paradise City, the docks and the strip are explicitly mentioned in the story slides, but there's no mention of Little Italy or the Poor. I was just calling it the Poor. Given the timescale, my train of thought is that it's the upper class areas. That's Little Italy and Poor. I think there was a period of gentrification which pushed people out. People in Little Italy were squeezed out, and maybe the Poor district too. This idea doesn't have legs, since, most anywhere in this game could just as easily be the Poor, and Little Italy just plain never comes up. It's just something that I realized after editing, that maybe at some point there was gentrification, but I don't know how much it's worth thinking about the canon and history of Paradise City. It's more for my own amusement than anything really concrete. So yeah, that's a game theory. Fuck, I could be a YouTube millionaire, actually, with bangers like that, if only people knew about the games I was talking about. Also, in the interim, I have been looking for more criminal strategy games. I want a game that is properly about building, running, overseeing, and managing a criminal empire. If it also has action-based gameplay, that would be a boon, but, you can't have everything. I don't mind era or gang type, or if it's post-apocalyptic even. Mafia, Triad, Yardies, Yakuza. Guerrilla fighters overcoming a corrupt government. Or just, being bandits. I'll take it. I want to raise some semi-organized hell. And I've slipped off of Kenshi again. Freeman Guerrilla Warfare isn't quite where I want it yet. And I don't know, I'm not feeling like another playthrough of Mountain Blade Warband. Maybe when Bannerlord comes out. I said I'll be playing Bannerlord when that comes out, 5 years ago? 5+ years ago in my Warband video. And you know what? It's just as true when I say it now. How times have not changed. I've seen the old gangster games, 1 and 2, both had issues on my PC. I've been looking into Constructor, Mob Rule, and the remakes of those 2 games. Omerta sucks. I've been keeping an eye on Pax Narcotica, but I'm not entirely optimistic about Pax Narcotica, if I'm going to be honest. We'll see how that shakes out. Empire of Sin, that's another year off. just send me some recommendations if you know any. There is another game I bought recently, I'm sorry, so there's one more that's not worth recommending, but I can't remember the name of it, and I'm not going to open up Steam to look. So just recommend anything that comes to mind. I want to play a big criminal boss man. I'm in that mood right now. Escape from Paradise City underwhelmed me so much, I want to play a good version of it. Speaking as an unashamed booze hound and cocktail enthusiast, I'm pretty sure most of the cocktails in Paradise City aren't real recipes save for the Black Russian. It does make me wish for a game with proper liquor-based buffs and debuffs, perhaps to a greater extent than, say, the Fallout series. What do you think would be an interesting way to implement alcoholic stat changes? I drink a decent amount, perhaps too much, but I'm more for beer and neat spirits. You know, I like a straight bourbon, that's my go-to. That said, yeah, besides the Black Russian, these are most definitely all fake. Which is a shame. I want some Warrior's Oil. But then Warrior's Oil isn't a drink, it's magic. My response to alcohol, personally, is mostly drowsiness. I'm a tired drunk. So I don't actually drink to get drunk mostly. I have to keep my levels to a very good thing to get... Because I'm a happy drunk besides, but I quickly pivot into tired. So I have to be very, very... I have to keep my levels of alcohol very, very careful. Turns out tequila, especially... Tequila knocks me out really fast. Like, that jumps past happy drunk to tired drunk right away. So let's go through some examples and I can build up a case here. Catherine had alcohol make you go faster in dream segments, and as you drank, you got alcohol trivia. There's no better buff than knowledge, so there you go there. I don't feel that alcohol should be buffing accuracy or agility. But in a fun irony, agility is typically a stat that decreases fall damage in games where that is a factor. Alcohol can help you make a landing, like the story of Alexei Ruskov. He survived 2 consecutive 15-meter falls after 3 bottles of vodka. He's uncertain why he jumped out of his window the first time, but when he got back upstairs and his wife was mad at him for doing that, he decided to leave the conversation out the window. So yeah, he did that again. It's a good news story. But I think the reason there is because he was drunk, he wasn't tensing his body. He allowed his body to hit the ground limp rather than hit the ground hard. So, you know, keep that in mind. Yakuza treats alcohol as a buff to heat. You build it faster and get access to exclusive moves. Which I buy. Alcohol decreases inhibition. So it's just in this case allowing Yakuza characters to get angrier faster, to get fightier faster. As for alcohol when it's a charisma buff, I think that's wrong. Alcohol should decrease your charisma, except to people who are also drunk. In that cases, both parties get buffed charisma. Meanwhile, a sober person talking to a drunk goes both ways. The sober person is now buffed against the drunk person. So, you know, bigger successes and failures, if that makes sense. Because if you fail a charisma check against a drunk person, you should therefore also get bigger penalties, because if a drunk doesn't like what you're selling, they've got less stopping them from hurting you. Hitting you. I just meant to say hitting you, not hurting you. Hurting you sounds way worse than hitting you. Hitting you can still sound like a comedic lamp. And lamp means punch. If they like what you're selling, then they're more likely to buy in all the way. So, alcohol buffs, I feel, should be a double-edged sword. It makes you more flexible, more resilient, more stupid. And yes, being stupid can be a buff. It can be useful. In a physics-based fighting game, I imagine alcohol would make you more uncontrollable, but in that, more unpredictable. As your arms flail and your movements become sloppier but heavier, you take less damage from ragdolling since you don't tense up, and you also just feel it less because you're inebriated, you're sort of anesthetized. Perhaps access to drunk dialogue options, and with that, a perk where you can pretend to be drunk convincingly to access those same options. Addiction is often a good thing to have to manage, but as the only limiter on drug use in games, it's often a dull one, boiling point notwithstanding. Alcohol has immediate benefits and obvious drawbacks. I know it's basically a second question, but I propose an idea. Don't worry about asking more than one question. Using Hamachi or some similar service, could you simulate a LAN connection between you and somebody else willing to install this garbage on their PC and see what Escape from Paradise City is like in multiplayer? Don't have to do it if it's too much effort, but it's an idea. This is also assuming EFPC has LAN multiplayer functionality. Just trying to think of ways around GameSpy and LAN come to mind. A much shorter answer to this, since it's a possibility. It does have LAN. I haven't touched Hamachi in at least half a decade, and very few of my friends like Hamachi. One I know even just outright refuses to touch it. So it's not an out, but I don't know. I'm gonna confess to not being totally interested, but it's something to keep in the back pocket because I'm not uninstalling EFPC. I'm keeping that. That's just, even though I doubt I'm playing it again, I'm holding on to it, I'm hoarding that. If Mario was in this game, how would he fare in taking over the city? On the one hand, Mario kinda did it back when it was harder to do so. He didn't really take it over, but he had a lot of swell. He had a lot of sway. But he had the ability to actually control units, so he had an edge there. I think Mario could have easily taken over the city, but he didn't know about the liches and vampires. So he was doing a Sisyphean task. He had the means and the skill to take over the city, but not the knowledge. Or the mills. Meanwhile, Boris, Porter, and Angel, I can't argue they lacked what it took to take over the city in means and skill. They weren't as powerful as Mario, but they knew the right things. Not to mention, Mario wasted decades of his life on revenge, rescue, and revenge again. By the time he had nothing to do but take over the city anyway, he was a broken husk. The tragedy of Mario, besides his whole life, is that, like I said, we never hear about him in Escape from Paradise City. His empire, his family, likely crumbled. Going back to what I said about the actual moral, crime pays, but only if you go all the way, Mario was inhibited by his family, so he didn't go all the way. How the fuck did 11-year-old you end up with a copy of this game? In the case of this game, it wasn't 11-year-old me. 11-year-old me got gangland. It was 14-year-old me, at the earliest, that got Escape from Paradise City. I believe I saw a magazine ad for it and got it because by that point, I did kind of want a game where I was a criminal strategy man. I really hope Empire of Sin is good. Who would win in a fight between the three protagonists? If it's a straight fight, no units involved, we can write Boris off as the weakest. At that point, it's whether or not Angel can close the gap and just cut Porter down. And with that broken-ass health half a move, that maybe she'll have it. But even then, Porter can use Last Stand. So ultimately, I think a fiery explosion wins. Gonna one-up Gone Rampant's question and say who would win in a fight between the three protagonists and Mario from Gangland. Ultimately, I still think it's the fiery explosion. Mario has terrible accuracy and actually has to use medkits and standing still to heal, so, he'd have to get in there. Now, if units get involved, Mario can probably take that fight from halfway across the city, sitting in a nice office taking phone calls, drinking liquor, while those three die without him, even there. Since they're not vampires, they'll maybe stay down. If not, then, well, that's a fight that never ends, really. And I suppose that with this, we say goodbye to Paradise City, goodbye to Media Mobsters and Sirius, goodbye to Telltale and Minecraft Story Mode, and, close the books on two weird games, one of which was another weird game from when I was a kid. That well isn't quite dry yet, but it's drying. So, see you next time, everybody.